It was the ultimate hard reset, a cataclysm so total, so absolute, that it didn't just end a civilization, it erased the biological evidence of what that civilization had become. For centuries, we have been taught the Sunday school version of the Great Flood. We are told it was a moral punishment, a divine reaction to a humanity that had become wicked. We imagine thieves, murderers, and idolaters. But if you analyze the oldest surviving text with a forensic eye, a different, far more terrifying picture emerges. The destruction wasn't just about sin, it was about containment. It was a planetary sterilization event designed to halt a viral corruption of the human genome itself. The ancient world wasn't just behaving badly, it was biologically mutating. But to understand this, we must open the pages that history tried to burn. Enter the Book of Enoch. For over 1,000 years, this text was not considered a heresy. It was considered scripture. It was quoted by the apostles in the New Testament, treasured by the mystic Essenes who hid the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it remains a cornerstone of the ancient Ethiopian Orthodox Church to this day. Yet by the 4th century, the power brokers of the emerging Western Church systematically hunted it down, purged it from the canon, and relegated it to the shadows of Apocrypha. Why? What were they afraid of? The standard academic answer is theological inconsistency. But the text itself suggests a more visceral reason. The canonical Genesis account is vague. It is a summary. But Enoch? Enoch is the black box recorder of the antediluvian world. It details exactly what happened before the rain started. It describes a world where the barrier between the terrestrial and the celestial was shattered. To the early church fathers, attempting to build a unified, controlling theology, Enoch was dangerous. It didn't paint the cosmos as a predictable hierarchy of order. It painted Earth as a quarantine zone for a cosmic rebellion. It suggested that the blood running through the veins of the ancients was no longer purely human. It presented a history where gods didn't just watch from the sky, they descended, they ruled, and they engineered a nightmare that threatened to make the human species extinct long before the first drop of rain ever fell. It began in the days of Jared, a name that literally translates to the descent. The text recounts the moment 200 entities stood upon the precipice of Mount Hermon, a location that still holds a forbidding, spectral energy in the modern Levant. This was not a casual visit, it was a coordinated defection. Led by a figure named Semyaza, these beings, known as the Watchers, swore a binding oath. They knew the transgression they were about to commit would carry an eternal penalty. They did it anyway. They did not come as vaporous spirits haunting the night. They came as physical beings, possessing a terrifying compatibility with human biology. The Book of Enoch describes an exchange that feels less like mythology and more like an unauthorized technology transfer. In exchange for access to the human genome, the Watchers offered forbidden knowledge, the secrets of metallurgy to forge weapons of war, the chemistry of cosmetics to alter appearance, and the cutting of roots, the dawn of pharmacology and sorcery. But the true horror lay in the biological merger. The text states they took wives from among the daughters of men. The result was the Nephilim. Pop culture often depicts the Nephilim merely as giants, oversized warriors wielding clubs. But the ancient descriptions imply something far more grotesque and destabilizing. They were an invasive species, an apex predator inserted into an ecosystem that had no defense against it. These hybrids were intellectually superior, physically dominant, and voraciously hungry. Enoch writes that as their numbers swelled, the agricultural capacity of the earth collapsed under their consumption. When the crops failed, they turned on humanity. And when the humans were decimated, they turned on the animal kingdom. This is where the narrative shifts from a story of sin to a story of contamination. The text specifically notes that the corruption spread to the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the creeping things. This phrase, all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth, suggests something distinct from moral failure. An animal cannot sin, a wolf cannot be immoral, but an animal can be biologically corrupted. We are looking at descriptions of cross-species amalgamation. The ancient world became a laboratory of horrors, filled with chimeras and biological paradoxes that violated the natural laws established at creation. The image of God, the specific genetic blueprint of humanity, was being systematically overwritten. The bloodlines were no longer pure. The code was being hacked. The earth, Enoch tells us, cried out against the lawless ones. It was a biosphere in panic. The violence wasn't just tribal warfare, it was a war against nature itself. The Nephilim were consuming the planet, stripping it bare, and twisting the life forms upon it into unrecognizable shapes. If you view the Great Flood through this lens, the waters were not an act of anger. They were an act of sanitation. The architect of life looked down and saw a code that was irretrievably broken, a hard drive overrun by a virus that would eventually consume everything. To save the root code of humanity, to save the future, the entire system had to be flushed. The warning was clear. The infection had to be drowned, or nothing would survive. So why was this text excised? Why did the Council of Laodicea in the 4th century forbid it from being read in the churches, casting it into the abyss of forgotten lore? The official explanation cites dubious authorship, a concern that the text was not written by the patriarch Enoch himself, but by later mystics. But the psychological reason is likely far more potent. The Book of Enoch was not banned because it was false. It was banned because it was too specific. It stripped the veil off the supernatural. It transformed demons from abstract concepts of temptation into physical, intelligent antagonists with names, hierarchies, and political agendas. It presented a world where the threat to humanity wasn't just spiritual disbelief, but a tangible genetic invasion. For a church trying to centralize power and simplify the message for the masses, Enoch was a complication. It invited too many questions about the nature of reality, the physiology of angels, and the fragile definition of what it means to be human. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of Enoch is not its history, but its relevance. Consider the specific gifts the Watchers gave humanity: advanced weaponry, the alteration of the body through chemistry, and the manipulation of nature. These were the catalysts for the antediluvian apocalypse. Fast forward to the 21st century. What defines our modern age? We have split the atom to forge weapons of ultimate destruction. We have mastered pharmacology to alter our chemistry. And now, with tools like CRISPR and artificial intelligence, we stand on the brink of rewriting the human genome once again. The New Testament contains a cryptic warning. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. If the days of Noah were defined by the hybridization of biology and the unauthorized acceleration of technology, then we are not just reading history, we are watching a recursive loop. We are standing at the same precipice that the ancients stood upon, holding the same forbidden keys, convinced that this time we can control the outcome. The Book of Enoch was buried in the sands of time, perhaps to protect us, or perhaps to blind us. But the sand has shifted, the text has resurfaced, and its warning vibrates with a terrifying resonance in our digital, gene-edited age. The ancient world is not silent, it is just waiting for us to listen.